Good evening and welcome to Tinkering with Edkelar. For this time I can present a vintage desktop calculator. The model is a Hewlett-Packard 91. It features a bubble LED display alongside a thermal printer. It operates on the HP typical RPN mode. That means that computations aren't typed in as usual, but rather performed in a stack-based manner. You enter one value, then another one, and then you tell the calculator how to combine these two values. It is certainly strange, but some folks swear by it, while others just swear at it. You pick your side. When the calculator arrived, I had no idea if it was operational or not. It was sold as is for parts only and didn't come with a battery nor a power supply. Besides that, it was yellowed quite extreme. This model was released in 1976 and originally sold for $425, which is over $2,200 in today's money. No wonder there's an integrated metal bracket to tie it to your desk. The physical design inside has three PCBs. A logic board with the power supply and main operational components, the printer PCB with the driver components for the motor and print head, and an I/O board with the keyboard and LED matrix. They are held together with some interesting spring contact pegs that directly connect to some plated through holes. Quite a low-cost solution. Doing some retrobrighting on the case led to no visible difference, so I decided to give it a coat of paint instead. The keys are heat staked to the plunger, which means no non-destructive way of getting them out. A dry clean has to do for them. At least they are yellowed evenly. The display bezel was broken off, so I had to glue the standoffs back in order to make the bubble LEDs stay where they should. The printer mechanism also needs a good clean. Note that the printhead connector is a rather evil one. I ripped off a bit of the flat flex in the process. It is almost like the socket has some barbs that keep the wire in. Even using a shim didn't do all that much. Recapping time! The motor has a bipolar electrolytic across the brushes to snap the back EMF and switching noise. I couldn't find one in that size, so I did the old back-to-back regular cap trick. Certainly good enough for that purpose. Finally, I got all things together to assemble it again. The external power adapter, originally AC, is missing, so I put in about 9 volts of DC, which should go via the rectifier and provide enough power to replace the missing NiCad battery. And now here's the problem. It wouldn't power up at all. Nothing. Lots of poking and prodding later, I found out that it would power on when I removed the printer board, but for some obscure design choice, the LC oscillator is located there. So I have to jumper those two connections to get a clock signal. The calculator works without the printer connected, but not with. Initially, I blamed the fault on some broken driver chip on the printer board. Those are just some dip cases that have 4 NPN transistors inside. Simple enough to replace with a similar part. Little did I know that I was on the wrong track here. Progress. It seems to work just fine, but then I realized something weird. It seems that some digits in the middle of the display are cutting out. Oh no, is the LED display broken? The only schematic that I could find on the internet is a hand-drawn version. It is correct, but slightly confusing to me. When poking around, I found out that not only the 2 digits are missing, but also the keys that are connected to the same lines in the matrix aren't doing anything. Which is even worse, because one of them is the yellow key that activates the second functions of the buttons. So by not having that one button, I lose pretty much 50% of the functions, including pi. This cannot stand. It is clear that the chip that is driving the combined LED and keyboard matrix is misfiring on a few channels. These segments are controlled via the anodes, and those all work. The digits are controlled by their cathodes, which are connected directly to that chip and also provide the lines of the keyboard matrix. Based on some poking, I found out that the chip gets a clock signal and a data signal. That data signal is low with every 15th clock pulse. To me, that indicates a clock shift register that is pushing that low signal out the 14 driver lines. So that should be simple enough to reproduce, right? Well, yes and no. I first tried two 74HC164 8-bit shift registers, but that didn't work out well. You see, the logic chips provide logic level inputs and outputs, about 5 volt-ish, but the supply voltage of the chip is the unregulated battery voltage. That difference and the fact that the input feeds back to the logic board caused all sorts of errors. After much searching, I found a new chip, TPIC 6B595, which is very similar but built on pure FET in and outputs. That should work just fine. And indeed, it provides nice signals. In between, I also ran into 2 issues with the replacement chip. Issue number 1. It takes a high input to activate the open drain output, which means it is essentially an inverting shift register. The solution for that was a quick transistor inverter in front of the data input, so I pulse a high bit instead of a low bit. Now the tricky part, finding out the sequence that the output needs to pulse. Issue number 2. It has 2 clock signals rather than 1. I thought I could connect them together, which did work, sorta. You see, the second clock is a strobe clock that will transfer the shift register to the outputs. Since both react to rising edge, that means that the actual output is 1 behind the shift register. I was hoping that this might work because there are 15 pulses for 14 digits. But no, the first digit has to be active on the first clock pulse. And so I was off by 1 digit. I had to add another transistor to make an inverted signal for the strobe clock, so the shift clock would slightly precede the strobe one. The annoying problem here is that the calculator pulses the anodes right with the clock pulse. That means that there is now a phantom segment showing up on the top of a digit if it is on in the previous one. And ever so slight delay might have been better than just inverting the clock. The final function that the broken chip was providing is the battery indicator, which might be the reason it is powered by the raw battery voltage to begin with. This version doesn't have as sharp a transition as the original one, but I felt an op-amp and a reference voltage would be overkill. Now that the keyboard is working, let's focus on the printer. Because when I unhook the print head, it seems to be working fine. The motor moves and it pretends to print stuff. I found out that when I connect the print head after power up, it works fine, including printing letters and numbers, but when I connect it and then power up, it just sits there, burning the paper. Now here's the problem. The calculator is optimized for a NiCad battery, which I don't have. And to charge that, there is an 8.2 ohm resistor in series with the power supply. That is a viable option to trickle charge NiCad cells, but since I'm now powering the device across that resistor without the battery as a buffer, I have hit an unexpected design flaw of the circuit. You see, when powering on, the print driver goes into an all outputs high state. That means initially it powers up all 7 print pixels, which are 10 ohms each. And now there is a combined load of 1.5-ish ohms against the 8.2 ohms input resistor. So naturally, all the supply voltage will collapse and what's left isn't enough to bring up the electronics. So it gets stuck in that state, while the dropper resistor also heats up considerably. Yikes! This might be why the PCB is burned out underneath that resistor. You cannot power that thing without the battery or it becomes a fire hazard. Speaking of battery, I got 4 new sub-C NiCad cells and designed a wrapper with matching contact points for the replacement pack. The contacts for the battery tabs make good material for the contacts in the pack. It took a bit of soldering and fiddling, but the cells fit. And after connecting the battery wires to the PCB, the calculator also powers up with the print head installed. Now, putting it all together again. finally, trying it out. Woohoo! It works! It calculates! It prints! And here's where the very good and uplifting news has turned into very sad news. Right when I followed the manual to do a few test calculations, the calculator locked up, stuck digit and sizzling paper. It seems that at least one more chip was on its way out. The troubleshooting had me poking and thinking mostly, so no, there's no immediate footage, sorry, but here's the rundown. I started with the clock signals and got a clean and a nasty one. There's two clock lines in this, Phi 1 and Phi 2, but the logic lines were all over the place. Checking on the supply rails, the 6V one was reading 3.5 volts and the negative 12V one was at negative 18. Is something shorting out? After quite a bit of checking components in situ, I finally decided to probe the supply voltage without load and cut the trace leading away from the 6V regulator. And had a whooping 0 volts now, with proper pulsed signal out of the coil. So the 3.5 volts was actually backfeeding from the circuit? Whoops! The diode in between tested good before, but now that it's the only possibility left, when I desoldered the first leg, well, enough said. And a big thank you to Hurga for bouncing ideas back and forth. That really helps during troubleshooting. Now all that's left is a matching plug for the power supply and a better version of the rat's nest for the chip replacement. And not to forget reading up on the manual. This RPN stuff is a bit confusing at first. A note to owners of this device. That fail with fire mode makes me urge everybody out there to make sure the calculator is off when not supervised. I feel it might become a fire hazard if a key component fails. The switch does disconnect the battery, so no need to pop that out, but at least make sure it's really switched off. And this is why the video got delayed. I hope this little Christmas miracle is enough compensation. So that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Good evening and welcome to Sniffer Town with Ed Keller. Sorry.